Stuart Holbrook has spent his life in the world of collectors. As president of Theriault, the world's leader in the auction of antique dolls and figurative art for over 30 years, he's managed the often personal and always wild world of collecting and collectors. His market expertise and knowledge of trends comes to life in The Curious Collector, where he shares his experience and experiences in real-life stories, alongside sage advice on how to build great collections within the happy life of a collector.
Welcome back to The Curious Collector, everyone, and we are continuing on this week with part 2, a conversation with Bill Greening, who was the principal designer for over 25 years for Barbie at Mattel, an iconic figure in the world of fashion and Barbie design. And we had a great conversation in part 1. If you haven't listened to it, you need to go back and start there before you continue on here, because it leads you up through his early days as a child, growing into fashion, as a collector in college, and then getting that first dream job he always wanted at Mattel, designing for Barbie. And some fabulous stories. Bill, you are a great storyteller, and I want to thank you for that part 1 and look forward to more stories here now as we continue on your career with Mattel. Welcome back to The Curious Collector.
Thank you, Stuart, for having me back for part 2. Part 1 was a lot of fun. So, yeah, let's continue the conversation.
Great. So we got up to the point where you're in your first designs that you did for Barbie and how it felt. And I was just trying to imagine, and you shared so beautifully that pride and joy in not only doing a fashion design and not only designing for Barbie, but designing your dream in life, working for Mattel. And it was so incredible how you shared that. Over time, though, it began to change. You started off, and you mentioned you started off with the play line, but I think, was it in around 2006 that Mattel moved you into the collector line, because they saw you really had a vision as a collector as well and understanding that market. Can you tell us about that movement and transformation into the collector line?
Yeah. So, I really enjoyed my time on Barbie Playlines. It was a really fun time to be working on Playline. And it's funny because I think looking back at it now, and maybe we could come back to this question too, is just so many of those dolls that I worked on, like now those consumers are in their 20s and 30s, so they're quite nostalgic for a lot of the things I first designed. So it's funny to see the reactions to those original designs now.
Now they're collector dolls.
Yeah, I don't know. It's mind-blowing to see that, like, for example, like Princess and the Pauper was one of those Barbie movies that was released on DVD, and it was the first Barbie musical. And there is a whole culture online that is just obsessed with that movie and those dolls. And I wasn't even fully aware until a coworker was like, have you gone on Instagram and just typed in the hashtag Princess and the Pauper? And I couldn't believe it. Like, there's people dressing up like the characters, doing cosplay, there's fan art. So it's kind of wild to see a generation that was just so inspired by those kind of early Y2K era Barbie dolls I was working on. And now when I post anything about it on my social media, it's just like, they're like, oh my gosh, like you designed my whole childhood, or, and they share with me their memories of playing with those dolls. So that to me is really rewarding, to know that I made someone's childhood, their favorite birthday gift, their favorite holiday gift. It's burned into their memories too. So that's exciting.
And they're becoming collector dolls, because the line is really thin between play line and collector line, and that the play line will become the collector line eventually.
Right.
It really is the same. Yeah. And you're seeing that now with your early work.
Yeah. When I think of the history of Barbie, I look at it through Playline. When I look at the timeline, the time capsule of Barbie, like what trends, what fashion trends, what were the teenagers wearing of the time, I think that's always reflected well in Barbie Playline. And I think the level of detail we got in the dolls in that time period, yes, it makes them collector items now, because not only are those kids nostalgic for those dolls they play with from the childhood, I think the level of quality and detail of that era of Barbie is superior. like when I look at Princess and the Pauper, they feel like collector level dolls. Yeah, it just kind of blows me away when to talk to somebody that those dolls just kind of meant so much to them. You know, even boys that were just like, oh my God, like my sister had that doll and I wish for it so hard, and now they could buy it as an adult, and just what it means to them now to own it. So yeah, before we go too far into collector land, I think that was, now as an adult looking back, it's amazing to see like how much impact those original Playline designs had on people's lives and continue to still have.
And will continue to. Right. Nostalgia is the gateway to collecting. And, I go back long enough in the marketplace with auctions to remember when nobody really paid attention to the mod period. And then those collectors got into their collecting age and they wanted to go back to their childhood. And now everybody's collecting mod. And it's a huge part of the market. And now you're seeing superstar period rise to the top. And it just continues on from there. And so those early 2000s designs you did now are becoming collectible. You're getting older, Bill.
Yes, I am. I know. Yes, to all the collectors out there, start purchasing up Y2K product while it's still affordable.
Well, it's still, exactly.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of nostalgia for that. But yeah, in 2006, I did move over to we called it the collector line at the time. Now it's called Barbie Signature. But it started originally with me helping the team out on the vintage reproductions. And I think, over the years, Mattel has gotten, better with the vintage reproduction Barbies. And so I was really excited to help that team, the reproductions feel more authentic to the original if possible. And then once I kind of started helping with those dolls, and I started getting more projects on the collector line. And then, I was officially moved over that year. Ann Driscoll, who I had my first interview with, was my boss. So it was very exciting to work with Ann. And I definitely knew her design portfolio from her time as a designer at Mattel. So again, it was kind of a little starstruck and excited to be part of the collector line because I was a collector myself. So I felt like I was kind of giving back to my community of fellow Barbie collectors. So,
is there a difference in the design process? Is there a difference in how you would approach your ideas between the play and the collector line?
I guess because you're designing dolls for more of an adult audience, yes, you could approach the design aesthetic differently. With Barbie mainline, the primary target is children. So you're kind of looking for trends and things that appeal to a certain age group that's much younger. And with the adult collectors, yes, you are leaning into more nostalgia, maybe more fashion, and depending on if we were working with a certain celebrity or a movie, there was more opportunities like that. Like we did Barbies for Wizard of Oz and for Grease and stuff like that. Yeah, just different kind of partnerships. Like if you were doing a partnership in Playline, it might be like SpongeBob or Tickle Me Elmo. So a different kind of collaboration. So, for me, it's like just being a collector, and now I was designing for other collectors. It was like a full circle moment for sure. And I felt like I was where I needed to be at that time to kind of make a difference in the Barbie line. And, just for the whole community that knew me before I started Mattel. I mean, I was collecting Barbie for 10 years or more before I started my job at Mattel. So now I felt like, oh, this is a way for me to give back to my community, so to speak.
That's incredible. And that's probably the point where going to a doll show was not such an easy thing because everybody started to know your name at this point in the collector world.
Yeah, I mean, I still go to my local doll show. Listen, I'm always happy to answer a question or to sign a doll if I can. So I don't take it for granted, and no one's ever really kind of bothered me or crossed a personal space line. But Yeah, it was just a good feeling knowing that I was designing for the collector community and that I had a collector eye and a collector point of view. So I think that people kind of took my design work seriously and took my input seriously if I had suggestions on, what dolls we should be doing. Yeah, it was a fun transition from working on the kids' dolls to now, quote unquote, like more like an adult collector doll market.
And that's, I think, must have been a joy for you. And you mentioned it, you have been amazing in being accessible for people to talk about your designs, and you converse with collectors, go to conventions, go to shows. And I think that's one of the reasons you're so revered in the collecting world now today, because you're a collector and you love collectors and you're willing to share with them. So this is great to hear a little bit of behind the scenes on that and your feelings. But I'm curious, I got to ask this question, Bill. Was there ever a design that you personally loved and you thought was going to really be the it design, and it was a little less received than you imagined? Or was there one that you liked it, but you didn't imagine it would have the success that it did?
Yes to both questions. Well, I think as we kind of talked about earlier, like definitely all the playline stuff, like you don't think about it at the time that you are creating memories for someone else's childhood, just like a previous Mattel designer did for me with Malibu Barbie. So you don't know the impact of what your designs have on people's lives. So I think that's always kind of an eye-opener. There was a doll that we did for Barbie's 50th in 2009, and it was a reproduction of a Francie friend called Becky. And Becky was a doll that was prototyped by Mattel, I think for the toy year, might have been 70 or 71, and it never made it to market. So the doll's name appeared on Francie clothing packages. It appeared in the little cross-sell booklets that came with the doll, dealer catalog. So there was all this reference for Becky, and I believe in that original collector encyclopedia, like what people consider the Barbie Bible, they often called things that never made it to market or prototypes things that ended up in Becky land. So,
okay.
So there was this kind of lore around Becky and, why she didn't make it to market. So in 2009 for Barbie's 50th, it was kind of like the sky's the limit. And my marketing counterpart was just like, well, if you could just do anything you've ever wanted to do, like what would you do? And so the idea of doing reproductions of prototypes of vintage dolls that never made it to market was exciting. So we did a few things. Becky was one of them. So we did a reproduction of this doll, or actually a reimagining is a better word. So I kind of imagined what would a vintage gift set look like with Becky if it had come out in that time period. So that was fun because I got to look at the Barbie fashions of that time period. The packaging designer looked at the graphics and the layout of those gift sets of that era. And so we were really trying to recreate something that never existed. So I was really excited about it. I think the most avid Barbie collectors that knew the Becky backstory were excited about it, but I don't know if it performed as well as I thought it was going to be like an instant sellout. And I remember seeing it at the company toy store at Christmas time on clearance for whenever, like it was $15, and I think the original retail was probably close to 100. So
it sounds like a great idea by concept. I mean, I'm fascinated by, oh, wow, the things we never actually saw.
Yeah, the people that were in the know were really excited about it. But why I wanted to share this story is because now on eBay, the Becky gift set is really hard to find and hard to come by. So it's interesting that it kind of took a while. Sometimes there might be something that maybe didn't sell well right out of the gate, but down the road, it becomes like this rarity that people are now like on the hunt for. So it's interesting. It may have not done well initially, but as time goes on, it becomes more desirable.
Bill, as a historian of 300 years of childhood and dolls and selling every genre, I can assure you that 100 years from now, collectors will be fighting over these dolls. So you will be validated and redeemed here soon. Don't worry.
Yeah. Becky was one of those ideas. And then we did something similar for the convention that year. We actually recreated some fashions that were illustrated on the original Barbie box, but never produced. So those were very well received. That was during Barbie's 50th. We had the right audience at Barbie convention, and they knew exactly what those fashions were. So no explanation needed. And those, most people seem to still treasure today. So that makes me very happy. And then there's other things that I worked on in the collector line that some people might say, oh, I'm looking for that doll and it's rare. And I'm like, what do you mean it's rare? So there are some things that to me don't feel so long ago, and they've already doubled, tripled, quadrupled in value on eBay. So that always kind of blows my mind too, when I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that that doll was going for that much money now. So it's validating that something that you designed is so treasured and in demand.
And that's the thing. And I think it's important people know the money part of it is not the defining aspect itself. It's the validation of it continuing on, it having a marketplace that is growing, and it gives you historical validation on the work you've done. And I think it's fabulous to see some of that happening now.
Yeah, it's wild when I see people talking about their holy grails of what they want in their Barbie collection. And it's dolls like the Haunted Beauty collection or the Faraway Forest collection, that these are now like what people put on like the top of their doll wish list. Yeah, that's exciting and very flattering to know that those are so highly regarded by the collector community.
Is there a particular design that you did over your career that you look back that you would say, if I was a collector, this is the one I would cherish? This is not you telling other collectors what to collect. This is Bill, the collector. This is the one I would really love to have because I guess you're the most proud of.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the original Barbie Basics line. I think that really kind of was a shift in collecting, and from what people have shared with me, a lot of people said that that line in particular brought them either into collecting Barbie or it brought them back to collecting Barbie. So that line in particular stands out. That idea for that line really just came from the collector community because I was watching people debox and redress their dolls and boil perm their hair and do all this stuff. So it was really a doll line designed for the community. There was clearly a new sentiment in the community that you didn't have to leave your dolls perfectly preserved in the box forever, that these dolls were, at a price point, they were like $20 each. The fashions they came with were pretty simple, and you could take it out and enjoy them and get your Barbie fix. And people still talk about that line till this day.
Interesting. Your love of this was that you inspired new collectors.
Well, the design of the line, it definitely felt modern and sleek and sexy. And I still really love the aesthetic of the dolls. And a lot of people are still very nostalgic for that aesthetic. Especially, I feel like it's kind of making a comeback within the Barbie collecting community. Like this dolls that were on the Model Muse body and kind of had more sophisticated makeup. But I think what the reaction from the community was around those dolls, this is even before Instagram started. So it was really the kind of acknowledging for the first time there is a doll customizer out there. And this was a line that was created for them. And as we kind of flash forward to the future, Barbie Basics kind of became the template for the lines that followed, like the Barbie look and the looks line. And these were all collector dolls designed for people to kind of take out of the boxes and play with. So yeah, it was just kind of like, this was like a new way for people to enjoy Barbie that maybe they haven't done in a while. Like, I think everybody was really busy keeping all the Barbies like perfectly preserved in box for a long time. And here was a line that said, like, take it out, play with it, have fun with it. So
merging the collector and the play line together, really, which is wonderful. You did a lot of collaborations as well over these years, especially in the collector line. You touched on this before with the signature line, is you did a lot of collaborations with celebrities and fashion designers over the years. This had to have been a highlight for you. What are a few of the favorite collaborations you did?
Well, the first one that comes to mind, and this won't be a shock for anybody that really knows me, but we did a one-of-a-kind Barbie for Kylie Minogue, who's one of my favorite, if not the favorite, pop singer of all time. So that was a really exciting moment because I've been a fan of hers for so long, and we were able to do this one-of-a-kind for her for International Women's Day in 2024. And she came into Mattel, and we kind of had a whole day with Kylie. So that was amazing. Another doll line that I worked on was called Ladies of the 80s. And we did Barbie dolls of Cyndi Lauper, Joan Jett, and Debbie Harry. And of course, I'm very passionate about 80s music because that was the music I was growing up on as a teenager. And all three of these women, I was a big fan of their music and also a big fan of the impact they made on fashion. I don't know, it was just a really fun line and I felt very passionate about it. I was able to meet Joan and Debbie and present them the prototypes of their dolls, and it was just a very cool moment to see their reaction. It's always cool when the celebrity is in on it. They know that this is fun and they know it's campy. They're flattered to be immortalized as a Barbie. I don't know why all these musicians stick out to me. Yeah.
Those three musicians each have a unique sort of look on their own. So it was not like you were doing just an 80s pop star look that all three of them sort of wore. They each had their own look. So you were designing something different for each one, which is, I mean, I can see Cyndi Lauper and how she dressed. It was very different from Blondie, and definitely Joan Jett was very different from both of them. So,
right.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, with any collaboration, whether it's a movie, whether it's a rock star, the challenge is trying to replicate the character or the celebrity. And, how do you, I guess, shrink it down to Barbie size? Like, how do you take life size and make it Barbie size? Because there's all sorts of considerations you have to kind of do to get it to the correct scale. But yeah, I don't know. It's always just fun when the celebrity is really into it as well. When they find joy in seeing their doll come together, and their reaction to it is always a lot of fun.
No, that's great. Wonderful stories. I knew you were going to say Kylie too. Everybody probably knows that. So
yeah,
we've seen your social media posts and we know how much you love her. So
yes.
No big surprise. So you've worked with fashion designers, traditional fashion designers over the years as well, haven't you?
Yes, there's been some great fashion collaborations. I mean, the most notable one that comes to the top of my head is working with Bob Mackie. I mean, clearly what a fashion legend. We talked earlier, maybe in part one, that, Bob Mackie had made such an imprint on me as a kid as like the definition of glamour. We're like watching all the like the Cher show and other variety shows he was designing for. So yeah, working with him was an honor and a delight. And he's the designer we have done the most Barbie doll partnerships with ever. So it's great that he loves Barbie and wanted to keep working with Barbie. It's easier when you have someone that kind of knows the ins and outs of design. And Bob, he has such a long career of fashion design, but he also had a very long career of designing with Barbie. So working with someone like him, you don't have to explain scale or this fabric is too thick. Like, he gets it. So he really spoke the language, but he's also just very passionate about all things kind of glamorous. And yeah, Barbie is one of them. So
yeah, he definitely has been the forerunner in traditional fashion designers loving Barbie. But I mean, there's been many others. What's the reaction traditionally with fashion designers that you've met over the years as far as designing for this scale? What do they talk about?
It's interesting because so many of them were also inspired by Barbie as children. Like Barbie is often the first experience that kids have with fashion and fashion design. So it's always great when you get to work with a design partner that really has fond memories of Barbie, or they say, oh my gosh, Barbie is what kind of got them started being interested in fashion. So a few designers that come to mind, like working with the Blondes, they were a great team to collaborate with. They're based in New York, and much like Mackie, they're very like over the top, like very glamorous, very avant-garde. So they were really cool to work with. We did a doll with a jewelry designer named Tarina Tarantino. Again, also very passionate about Barbie. We actually took a little snippet of her hair. She always kind of has like her signature hot pink hair, and we actually matched the color to get the exact color on Barbie. So yeah, I don't know. She was really cool to work with. She had a jewelry collection that was all inspired by Barbie. Yeah, so that was a really fun project to work with. And to kind of,
I never imagined, and you're right, that all the fashion designers who, as children, their whole leaning into fashion over the years may have started with Barbie.
A lot of people shared that story. Even when we did the Barbie dolls with Tim Gunn, he remembers playing with his sisters, Barbie and Ken Little Theater. I always love that everybody has a Barbie story. Like I always say, like if you love Barbie, hate Barbie, everybody has an
you got a story.
Barbie. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bill, do you see, while we're in this talking of fashion design, do you see Barbie influencing trends, actually influencing fashion, or do you see it more documenting current trends?
If I had to pick between the two, I would say generally Barbie has documented fashion trends. And I think that's the reason I loved to collect Barbie, because I was interested, or I am interested in fashion. And I always love that Barbie is a little mini time capsule of what fashion and beauty trends are happening at that moment in time. That being said, Barbie has been around for so long. I think now it has kind of flipped the script where you are seeing Barbie influence real life fashion. And I think, two great examples of that are the Moschino fashion show that featured like an entire Barbie collection. I'm blanking out on which year that was, but you could watch it on YouTube. And of course, the Barbie movie that summer, when that movie came out, it was every fashion magazine was talking about the year of Barbie and the color pink. And yeah, you could just see Barbie's influence all over popular culture of that time. So yeah, I think those are kind of recent phenomenons. Like sometimes I watch RuPaul's Drag Race and I could see one of the contestants wearing a look inspired by a Barbie doll design. And they will even reference Barbie as they describe the look.
Since the movie, for sure, especially, people have really embraced Barbie core, and you're seeing everyone dressing now in that manner. Yeah, so now it's gone beyond documenting. It's become a trend in itself. And you've been part of all that. You've led me into a question that I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on the Barbie movie and what it meant to you. And I was shocked personally how much I loved it. I didn't know what to expect. And I went to see that movie and I walked out and was like, wow. And I have to admit that I now even refer to my home as the Mojo Dojo Casa House. So it has absolutely had an amazing effect on people's perception of Barbie. And I'm curious your takeaways and your thoughts and what you did as part of that movie as well.
Yeah, I mean, I also loved the movie, and I particularly loved Barbie Land, especially just for the aesthetics of everything. I think they captured the aesthetic of Barbie really well in the film. Yeah, I love that the movie brought us terminology like Barbie core. Like, I don't even know people were even saying Barbie core until all the fashion magazines really started leaning into the aesthetic that was coming from the movie. And that's become part of our vocabulary now. And the thing I also love about it is that for the people that already have been loving Barbie and collecting Barbie for so long, like myself, I don't know if it was validating. Like, we've known all along Barbie is cool and collecting Barbie is cool. And then I felt like the world was kind of catching up a little bit. Like, oh yeah, it's cool to dress in pink and it's cool to embrace this aesthetic. I think it really kind of brought Barbie to the forefront of pop culture and the conversation. So that was exciting to see the kind of world just embrace Barbie like in such a big way.
Yeah, I talk about this movie, and a lot of people say, "Oh, well, that Barbie movie created all of this collector frenzy for Barbies," and I'm like, "No, I don't think that's the case. I think it validated it, so people were paying attention to it more, but it was always there." And I think Hollywood studios recognized the importance of nostalgia with Barbie and her effect on so many generations, and realized this opportunity to tap into that a little bit, into helping people see something beyond just the idea of a Barbie doll, that there's an entire culture behind this. And I was happy to see that for all the girls who had cut Barbie's hair and put makeup on her that was all disheveled, that she even had a place in that movie. Yes. So it gave multi-generations of collectors validation, and owners who played with them validation of what they did. And it was a wonderful. And I'm sure that had to be a highlight in your career to be with Barbie and Mattel during this time to watch it all happen. So
yeah, it was great. I remember going to the theater to see the movie with some other Barbie collectors that I'm in a group chat with. We call ourselves the Doll Mafia. But this was my little Barbie family, my doll family. It was fun because we all wore pink to the theater, and we got there and like everybody was wearing pink. So, that was kind of like witnessing this phenomenon of everybody embracing pink. Straight men wearing pink to the theater. It was just amazing to see the world just embracing the Barbiness of it all.
Oh my gosh, yes. And like you sitting in this movie theater, and little did anyone know sitting around you, except for your friends, that here was a man who had, right here in the theater watching this with them, who had given a lot of the life to Barbie over the past 25 years. That's incredible. You just went to the theater and got to witness this like a fly on the wall. It must have been such a proud moment, almost going back to like seeing your first design you ever did in the store and coming to be. These are great moments.
Yeah, it was definitely an exciting time, I think, just not only for Mattel, but just I think for the whole Barbie collector community in general. I remember like anxiously anticipating what Margot Robbie was going to wear on the red carpet as she was recreating all these life-size Barbie looks from, again, taking it back to real fashion, that, all these fashion houses were creating Barbie costumes inspired by Solo the Spotlight or Day to Night. Yeah, like we were all like, oh my gosh, like what is she going to wear next? I know she didn't get a chance to wear all of them. I think certain countries shut down the premiere or something, but I remember when her book came out with all these life-size Barbie looks in there, and there's a few pages of Margot wearing a fashion inspired by one of my designs called Cherry Pie Picnic. And so that was intended to be one of the looks that didn't make it to the red carpet, but it made it into the book. And just to see, here's Margot, who played Barbie in the Barbie movie, and now she is wearing a design inspired by a doll that I did. So that was a very exciting moment too, just to kind of have that moment in pop culture, and it's documented and forever in this book. So that was very flattering in a way.
That's a great story, Bill, and I really appreciate you sharing some of the emotions you felt during this time. I'm just transfixed listening to you. But let's take a step into the collector, Bill. We've talked about a lot of your collecting side of it and how it impacted your work at Mattel and your work with Barbie. But take me inside the mindset of the man who went home at night. Now, you would think that the guy who owned the chocolate factory wouldn't go home at night and eat chocolate. But you were doing that. You were working all day with Barbie, living this day in and day out, and yet you still went home at night. And you were a collector, and you continued to collect all through the years, and were very passionate as a collector. Why did you do this?
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you live, eat, breathe, sleep Barbie. Well, with the job and the hobby, I've tried in my brain to kind of keep it very separate, just so I don't get like quote unquote Barbie burnout. My collection has generally focused on really heavily the 60s and 70s of Barbie and other fashion dolls of that era. So because it was so period specific, the aesthetic was so different, it made it feel separate to me in my brain that over here was vintage and the work was generally, more modern, except maybe when it came to vintage reproductions. And then my knowledge of vintage Barbie just enhanced those reproductions to hopefully make them feel more accurate. And generally, that's kind of how I tried to separate it, that work was one thing and the hobby was another.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And you said you really like the 60s and 70s period. Do you think that was nostalgia growing up? Or do you think it was just a period that you liked the best, the designs?
With the 70s, that is definitely more nostalgia based. Not only was it the dolls that maybe I remember playing with, like Malibu Barbie, and also the clothing silhouettes of the time or something that when I look at Barbie, I like, oh, my mom had a pantsuit like that. Or, I saw Linda Carter wearing a dress like that on Wonder Woman. So there's a lot of nostalgia around the aesthetic of the 70s era dolls. And then I think for the dolls from the 60s that were kind of before my generation, as a fashion student, I was really just into discovering more about the mod era look and the aesthetic. So it was just something I was personally into. And I felt the Barbies of that era looked so different than any Barbie on the shelf. So I was really drawn to the aesthetic of that particular era.
Which leads us to this moment. And this is a lot of big turning points for you right now. And one of them is that last year, you decided to sell a part of your collection that you had spent 30 plus, almost 40 years working on. And Theriault and I will be up on the podium doing the auction for this on May 18th at Bradley Yarborough's Swell event. And so I'm wondering what led, I mean, we've talked about it, but share with others, because I think a lot of collectors, they think about that moment of when they want to sell part of their collection or all of their collection, and especially someone like you, because Barbie is your life. Every collection is an extension of that collector, but this is really an extension of yourself. So what was your thought process behind your decision to sell part of your collection?
It's a good question, Stuart. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm not stopping collecting Barbie. Like, I think that is a constant in my life. And I think when some people saw that there was an auction coming up, they're like, oh my gosh, is Bill selling off all his collection? And the answer is no, it is not all of it. I think with any Barbie doll collector, if you've gone to convention, people, they edit their collections all the time. I think that is part of the fun of the hobby. I was super duper into at one point, and my collecting taste may have moved focus over here. So I find that happening a lot, where things that I didn't even look at the first time around of collecting, that I am rediscovering the second time around. So it was just, to me, it was time just to do a little bit of editing, things that maybe I had like triples, quadruples of. I was like, can I keep two and let two more go? What could I comfortably let go of? What do I want to share with the community? I think there's even a joy of finding a new home for a doll. Like, it's been in my collection for X amount of years, and it's brought me that much joy. And sometimes it's about letting go so someone else can experience that joy of owning that doll for a bit. So certainly there's probably dolls I may never let go of, but I think that's the fun part about the hobby, is acquiring new acquisitions and sometimes letting them go to new homes.
Bill, it's so interesting to hear you say that. every collector's greatest fear, I've done podcasts on this and talk about this in my lecture circuit around the country. Every collector's greatest fear is that one day nobody will want their dolls. I mean, it's actually a legitimate thing that collectors go through. And I'm always reassuring them that, believe me, every new generation's coming in to collecting and your dolls will be protected. But that's what you want to know. You want to know they're being preserved and they're being protected and they're being loved, and that seeing this process yourself, seeing them go to collectors and the joy and happiness when they get that item that you've protected for so long is really a rewarding experience. And I'm glad you touched on that you wanted to see that and wanted that moment to share these with other collectors as well. Perhaps even a new generation just coming in, new collectors.
I've read stories about some collectors that have liquidated everything and then they get back in the hobby and they start buying what they previously sold. So
those are my favorite customers, by the way.
Right.
Just so you know.
One of my good doll friends, her name is Leslie, she kind of said, with few exceptions, with like certain items that are so rare, she's like, generally, she said eBay is like your closet. Like if you really want to find something, chances are you will find it at some point, whether that's at Barbie convention, whether it's an auction or whatnot. But there's a few treasures that would probably be harder for me to let go of. But I also think when I have if I have 10 straight leg skippers, can I live with 5? Like those are the kind of questions that I was asking myself. It was also kind of interesting to see how much I was ready to let go of too. So this is going to be like a test to see how it all goes.
A test of your emotions. I always tell collectors who come to their own auction, which you will be there for those attending the auction at Bradley Yarborough's Swell event, and the auction will be May 18th. Bill will be there, actually, and I think you'll be signing dolls as well for anyone who wants to bring a Bill Greening design doll in and meeting people. But I always tell the collector whose collection we're selling, if they're there at the auction, just walk around and start crying. With every single doll, say, "Oh, that was my favorite doll." And then just go on to the next one and stimulate those emotions. We're joking, of course, but you get it.
They're all my favorites, of course.
A famous collector, Rosalie Weil, once said, people used to ask her in her museum, "What's your favorite doll?" And she would always say, "The one that I'm holding." When you just said that, it really made me think of that quote she always had. But anyway.
That's good. I'm going to have to remember that one, Stuart. I'm very excited about the auction. This is the first time I've done a big auction like this, and I'm excited to work with you and Theriault. I'm excited to see how it all goes.
We're honored as well. And people can go to Theriault.com and you can actually view the catalog. You can also view a digital format, which mimics the actual printed published one at Theriault's issue site, ISSUU. And also at Theriault.com, you can order, if you want to have a keepsake, the actual printed catalog, which is full color and is entitled in honor of Bill Golden. And so definitely follow this auction, and you can watch it. If you can't make it to Bradley's Swell Fest, you can watch it online, Theriault.com, and you can bid live that day as well. So, Bill, in this context of talking about your collecting, is there one item that you absolutely dream of that you've never owned that you really, really aspire to for yourself as a collector?
Yes, there's always something new to discover, for sure, in the world of Barbie. What was that Holy Grail doll going to be? The first one that comes to mind, and I know it's been photographed in a couple books. I believe it was photographed in that original Barbie encyclopedia. And I believe Sarah Ames has it in one of her books too. But there is a very rare variation of a Malibu PJ doll that's wearing a minty green version of her swimsuit instead of the usual purple. And it was sold like the original Malibu dolls, on a bubble card or a blister card. And I have never seen that doll for sale ever. I've seen some pretty amazing dolls in some other collectors' collections.
I'm writing that down, by the way.
Yeah,
my goal is always to go find those for people.
Oh my gosh, please.
Bill, I will say this, though. I always tell collectors, may there always be that one doll you never get. And everyone's like, well, that's so cruel. And I'm like, no, that's the extension you need to continue collecting right to the end. You've got to always have one you can never find, or you'll stop collecting.
There's that one, and there's a few of them in the auction. There's a Barbie Best Buy dress from the 70s, and it didn't have a name, but it just has a stock number called 8680. And it is using up excess inventory fabric from other Barbie fashions. So collectors are really into collecting the variations of this dress because they recognize the fabric used on other Barbie and Francie fashions. And I think there's 3 maybe in the book. And as I've been hunting for the variations for years and years, there is one in this Skipper fabric from the original Skipper fashion was called Daisy Crazy, but there is a version of 8680 made with the Daisy Crazy fabric that is eluding me. I think I've seen it maybe twice posted on social media, but yes, I feel like myself, and there's probably a few other people I know on the hunt for that elusive dress as well.
Well, if enough people hear this, you may start getting phone calls soon.
Please, yes.
So
please reach out to me. Message me on Instagram or Facebook if you have either of these items. There's things like the PB Barbies that were made in Japan in the 80s before Mattel started doing reproductions. I didn't even pay attention to them the first time round, and I'm kind of rediscovering them in the past few years and just how unique they are. And there's like a hand-done quality to them that is so interesting. So it's that kind of stuff that I rediscover that maybe like now I've developed a deeper passion for collecting that I wasn't even thinking about in the 80s or 90s. So that's what makes the hobby so interesting, is that there's always something new to discover, or there's something maybe you overlooked, or maybe you're getting into a new era of Barbie that you hadn't considered looking at before. So that's what keeps the hobby fresh and new for me.
You know, I heard earlier in part 1 and earlier in this particular episode that you had this passion designing and loved it, and you had so much energy in talking about it. But I hear the same amount of energy and excitement and passion in the collecting, and you talking about the things you dream of and directions you want to go with your collecting. You're still there. And you've got a lot of collecting years ahead of you, and good luck with finding these. And now it's my goal to find them first and put them at auction and make you bid on them later on.
I will be texting you pictures of these immediately after this phone conversation.
Okay.
You know what you're looking for.
So, Bill, it's no big secret out there that you, after 25 plus years with Mattel and designing for Barbie, you're moving on in a new chapter in your life. And I'd love to hear a little bit. I'm sure many people, all the collecting world who revere you, would love to hear your thoughts on where this new direction is that you may be going and your plans for the future. You're always going to be a collector, we know that, but give us some thoughts on to other ideas you have going forward in this transitional moment.
It's definitely a new chapter in life, and my passion for Barbie is still quite alive. My collecting has not diminished because of where life is taking me. To the answer of what's next, I don't know yet. Like, I've been thinking about the possibilities, and there's ideas. I don't know. We'll just see which way the road kind of takes me a little bit. It is kind of like fresh information, and there's a mix of feelings of being nervous and excited all at the same time about what possibilities lie ahead. But I just hope to continue to being creative and being part of this doll community that's been so supportive, and I feel the love on social a lot. So just wanted to let the community know that. But yeah, we will see what's next. The chapter is still being written.
I think you summed it up beautifully, and I know your talent. I know the charm you have with collectors across the world and the community, and the way people revere you. And I'm really excited to see what this next chapter is. Even if you haven't figured it out, you will find something incredible. You have way too much talent, and we're all excited to see this next step and stage in which you create. So, Bill, we're going to end this part 2 and this conversation with you, which has been absolutely incredible. with a question I've always posed to everybody that we have on as guests, and that is your experience, your years in this, all that you've done, all that you designed. If you could write a letter to that, let's say, 18-year-old young man who's just going off to college and finding himself and dreaming of this world of Barbie, if you could write a letter to him, what would you tell him?
Oh, gosh. What would I tell a younger Bill Greening? I would just say don't give up on the dream and continue to push forward. You will persevere. Just stay passionate about what you love. Your dad gave you good advice, so just follow it.
It sounds like you're writing that letter to yourself now, even.
A little bit, yeah. I often think of my parents, especially in times of change, and looking back, thinking about that passion that led me to Mattel and just channeling that energy into what's next will be good.
Your dad's advice will ring true in this next stage. Do what
Definitely.
you love. Bill, thank you so much for spending all this time with us and sharing all the storytelling days of your youth and through Mattel and Barbie designs and just everything. It's been incredible, and you've been fantastic and forthcoming, and I cannot thank you enough for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Stuart, for inviting me to be part of your podcast, and very excited to see how the auction does, and thank you for your help on that too. And I look forward to seeing you in person at BradleyCon and on auction day.
I'm looking forward to it as well. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on The Curious Collector. And we'll see you next week for a new episode.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Curious Collector. The Curious Collector is hosted by Stuart Holbrook and produced by Tammy Trujillo. We invite you to follow us on social media and feel free to leave any questions you have for Stuart on Facebook at Stuart Holbrook-Theriault or follow the Theriault Company Facebook page. And you can stay up to date with the latest auctions and events at Theriault.com. We'll talk to you on the next episode of The Curious Collector.